Episode 307, Be Kind to One Another. This is the Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. A Varroa update, Saturday the 27th of August from the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries. Quote, Varroa mite emergency response daily update. No new detections. Euthanasia operations continue in the eradication zones. Affected beekeepers will be contacted directly by the New South Wales DPI to make arrangement as the operation progresses. The response team understands the challenge of this task and thanks the community for working with us. End quote. Almost a classical biosecurity eradication process. Beekeepers outside the eradication zone are still hyper-vigilant, funnily enough, but things seem to be following the textbook. A little pre-warning, I had the misfortune to stumble across another piece of polemic from George Monbiot a week ago, and the research to refute his obviously in-error statements is taking me longer than I would have wanted. But trust me, it will be worth the wait. In the same vein, I mentioned a Facebook meme a few episodes back about cows, a picture of them juxtaposed with industrial images, and the words, imagine how much propaganda effort it took to blame cows for climate change. Well, our good friends at Facebook decided to slap a not quite correct warning on the pic. Subtlety and the understanding of reality have very little to do with Facebook. I have appealed their decision, but I are yet to hear back from them. Yes, methane is a greenhouse gas of far greater intensity than CO2. But I'm yet to be convinced that there are more domesticated ruminants now than there were wild ones prior to the Industrial Revolution, meaning ruminant methane would be part of the standard background greenhouse gases the planet has been living with for millennia. But hey, easy sound grabs about cows are less effort than actually reading and thinking. Rant over. We are in the middle of a worker shortage here in the Antipodes, and as I hear from my many news sources, this is not an unusual situation around the rest of the world. The thing that's riled a number of producers, particularly primary producers in the fruit picking industry, is the introduction of minimal standards in the industrial relations setting. So that a fruit picker who now works more than 38 hours in a week has to be paid time and a half for the extra hours. Imagine that, rural workers being treated equally with others. How could such a situation arise? Well, centuries of exploitation of the less well-educated, the assumption by growers that they're doing the workers a favour by employing them at any pay rate, and a sizable power imbalance have screwed non-unionised rural workers since white settlement here in Australia. Remember, the first rural workers were convicts here in the Antipodes. The great shearers' strikes of the 1890s at least put some rules around the industry, and wool growers, at least the merino ones, didn't all end up going bankrupt. They weren't quite as profitable, but they survived. I understand other wool types are worth less than the cost of shearing in many parts of the world, so that's probably a different matter. And has also led to the rise in self-shedding and hair breeds, Wiltshire Horns, Dorpers, Damerers and so on. But the point remains. Fruit growers, not all of them by any means, but too many of them treated workers like dirt for generations, and those chickens are coming home to roost. There is a history of labour shortages following pandemics. The ever-gentle English ruling classes passed laws to keep wages low after the Black Death. Didn't work then, probably wouldn't work now. It is interesting that all the industries screaming for staff, fruit picking, vegetable picking, and there's a horror, hospitality, retail, nursing, aged care, disability support amongst others, are all traditionally low paid and therefore not under pressure to mechanise. Now aged care and disability support really shouldn't be mechanised. Fruit and veg picking have their challenges but are ripe for this mechanisation process. Hospitality and retail have started with self-checkouts, online bookings and so on, where I need never have contact with another human being. Then there's the alleged horrors of the Amazon fulfillment centres. People choosing to wear nappies rather than take time to use toilets because their every, and I mean every, movement is tracked for the entirety of their shifts. It is easier to turn humans into robots than to develop the things themselves, it would appear. Anyway, we are still living in a time of great change, change that we can shape with some organisation on our parts. The past 40 years since the Thatcherite Reaganomics Cultural Revolution was forced upon us, for our own good apparently. The collapse of civil society, whilst not part of any grand conspiracy, appears to have been a handy, unexpected byproduct of rational economics. Now, there's an oxymoron if ever there was one. That people are desperate can be seen in the rise of political extremes, and we know the social media moguls have exploited that for their profit, but it is still upon us. Friends I went to school with are regurgitating platitudes from overseas. Okay, from the US. And when asked to discuss why, turn into banshees. I'm starting to sound like a grumpy old man, and maybe that's fair, but maybe we all need to get a little bit grumpy. The pandemic didn't so much change things, other than for those who lost loved ones, and I'm in no way negating the suffering that's caused. On a societal level, it just brought out all the weak linkages and pressure points in our cultures and societies and brought them to the light of day. Are we not all, some countries more than others, waist deep in weak linkages and pressure points? Again, my go-to response is grow food and be kind to everyone, even the dipsticks. None of us can know what anyone else is dealing with. Hell, most of us don't fully understand our own motivations. So be kind and grow something to eat. It really is one of the best forms of self-care, planetary care and people care. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week.